and we still not incorporated, so we might ask Stone Soup to be our fiscal sponsor. So we are really deeply thinking about that relationship. So it's a good.
So the answer from Global Village Farms Co-op was that they seek to become a nonprofit umbrella for other cooperatives that they want to support, and that they may seek out a relationship with Stone Soup or a similar organization for fiscal sponsorship. Okay, next co-op.
Alright, so we're the Jaders, and I guess, so the question is how we're gonna relate to a nonprofit, or?
Yes, so do you have a relationship now with a nonprofit, and what is it, and then what, I guess for you, what would be the pros and cons, and would you want to continue in the future?
Well, yeah, so we do have a relationship with a nonprofit now with Roots, and they're our fiscal sponsor, and I mean, I think it's, you know, helping us a lot out now. You know, eventually the goal is to become financially, like, or fiscally, I'm not sure what the right word is, like independent enough that we can have, you know, be, become a registered business, whatever we choose it is, LLC or whatever, and you know, have our own bank accounts and, you know, be able to rely on, not rely on another organization that help us.
Excellent. Excellent. You give a shout for the greenhouse?
It's pretty short. We don't exist without Stone Soup right now.
True. Yeah, so we're working on the greenhouse project, which is seeking to build a greenhouse on Stone Soup property to start a greenhouse cooperative out of, you know, selling seedlings and other greenhouse products. Our relationship with the nonprofit is that we're currently we're definitely being incubated, and it's more along the inception stage, and the proposed funding that we've secured was through nonprofit means. It's like startup funds for building things, was through nonprofits and from nonprofits, from grant makers. And the advantages are probably it wouldn't happen or have as much financial support without it being fiscally incubated. And I think in the future, probably want to incorporate and be its own business, but because it's so connected, it would be on Stone Soup land because it's so connected to a nonprofit. It's hard to see where it would go in the future. Cool.
For us, we don't really have a relationship with a nonprofit formally. We've thought about some nonprofits in the area that we could collaborate with, like Providence Recyclable. We have a lot of overlapping people in our co-op and in the nonprofit. I work for both, and a couple of us do. So we thought about working with them in the future and possibly working on some collaborative grants together, because we've heard that's a good way to partner with nonprofits.
What about Roger Williams? It's not a nonprofit.
I guess through the legal clinic, we work with the Roger Williams Legal Clinic, which I guess is its own nonprofit. I forgot about that.
And possibly, if a founding member of your co-op is, would you say that your experience in one affects your experience in the other?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, definitely.
It's just a question that just came to mind. If you, like, you are the link, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and there's a lot of overlap with the communities we're trying to reach with, like, building bike culture, right? And like the youth that we work with at Recycle a Bike could possibly become involved with Soul Chariots, and there's a lot of overlapping educational programs that could happen. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
That's really cool. Serge?
What's up?
You want to speak for Future Focus? free to pass if you like.
Yeah. I have no idea what's going on here.
So I just didn't hear the question.
Yeah.
Oh yes, so would you like to speak for Future Focus? And does your co-op have a relationship with a nonprofit? And what is it? And what are the pros and cons you perceive?
Matt, can you help me start it off and then I'll add on some stuff?
We are being incubated by Worcester Roots Project, so our fiscal sponsor is Worcester Roots, and they're taking care of most of the administrative work for Future Focus. In the future, going forward, we want to incorporate, or pretty soon, we want to incorporate as a worker cooperative, and be fiscally independent, but still collaborate on some grants, because we do some mission-based work, like training youth and putting on a film festival. So those two things we still envision kind of being like contracted by Roots to do that mission-based work, and even helping write some of those grants and do that kind of collaborative work.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that pretty much sums it up.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
So, toxic soil busters, I guess, unless Kai.
Nope.
Hard times. Toxic soil busters, I guess, is probably an interesting case study for this question, because originally when it was founded by youth, the idea was to eventually become independent of Worcester's project. So this first sort of incubated co-op that was going to spawn off. And, X amount of years, how many years? 8? Holy crap. 8 years later, it's pretty clear that, like, the market for landscape remediation that we do isn't a viable business. And there's also lots of other problems that we run up against in terms of having a youth-owned business. There would have to be proxies for like liability, which is dicey. So it would probably have to be their parents who actually like owned and took on the liability. So there's lots of different obstacles that we face. So right now, it seems like Toxic Soil Busters is more of a youth program where people learn about co-ops and how to do those skills and really run a collective setting and those sort of values. And from there can get involved in the overall co-op movement, or start their own co-op that they're doing here, or just get involved in the community organizing.
And it seems with TSB that yeah. So I was just going to comment on the TSB thing, and also encourage us to move on quickly. But of course, I want to let you talk. With the TSB piece, it seems like its relationship is a quasi cooperative. It's difficult, but interesting. All the same, would be interesting for the case study. But it feels like it's more for the kids than it is for the money, right? So it's like kind of like the process is the product, because if it was consistently trying to sell something, then we would need, you know what I mean? But it's like the idea and the process of young people going through cooperative learning, hands-on, is the key.
So, neural robotics is sort of a very interesting case for this question. We were originally a regular regular LLC corporation from 2008 until 2013, and that's when we started shifting over our focus to worker cooperative. And at the same time, we started in the local makerspace, which is a 501c3 not-for-profit. The idea was to have the makerspace take all of the tools and development equipment that Neurobotics had accumulated as an engineering business, donate them directly to the the makerspace as its founding tool set and use the revenue stream of the makerspace to maintain the overhead of the facility while taking then a teeny tiny corner off to the side, but then having access to all the same tools that we had access to before, and making those tools available to the wider community so that everyone can have access to those tools. Another interesting interconnection is as we develop new industrial production equipment, we roll it out into the makerspace and give anyone who's a member access to that same level of industrial production that we would normally be selling out to industry at the same membership cost.
And no
So,
be tax.
do it?
And no be tax.
And not tax. Downside is actually the we are totally taxed because the membership model is not a tax exempt model. So we can take donations and those are tax exempt, but we just the regular revenue stream and the building, the facility itself, that's normal rules. Unfortunately, unless we became a church, which has its own problems. It would be really hilarious if the church is making
Robot church?
robot church, Futurama style. That would be
That's a
amazing.
god,
But yeah, so the collaboration is that the not-for-profit manages the space and has a wider community focus. The for-profit can tighten up and focus on product development and product sales, while at the same time getting very tight feedback loops from direct community use of the products that we're making before they're released, and having an even better thing to sell because we have that feedback loop built right into the system.
Why did you decide to change your business model?
Started reading more about surplus value and political economics. So it's very strictly ideologically driven, which is kind of a terrible thing to say. But from a business perspective, ultimately what it comes down to is the workers are actually producing value, whoever those workers are. At the end of the day, that the thing for sale was produced by the entire group of workers working together. Had one of them or any of them failed to perform their function, there would be no product. Therefore, everyone owns that product. Therefore, everyone owns the profit coming off of that product. So whatever value is created, the difference between the wage being paid and the price that it fetches at the market is that little surplus value. Well, that doesn't automatically go to some guy who came up with the idea. That goes to the workers that actually produce that surplus value. So understanding the internal microeconomics of a business and how that fits within the macroeconomic concept of a market economy that we do in fact live in resulted in a forced restructuring to maintain sort of ethical consistency.
I'm glad I'm not in
I'm so sorry. I totally didn't even think.
It's a workout, it's a workout.
What? I'm not interpreting.
I'm sorry.
Separate enough to go.
And it's been called to my attention that the bee co-op should have its own turn.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we were involved with the Global Village, I guess. Is that a nonprofit?
In English for Action.
And English for Action, which is a nonprofit. So
They were incubated actually from another nonprofit in Rhode Island.
called
They
English for Action.
call English for Action. They're all members or volunteers of the organization.
Very cool.
So
So you're started out of a nonprofit.
basically, yes.
So the nonprofit got funds to pay for their first training.
Oh, okay. And are you incorporated now?
No.
Okay.
Still
Before we move on to the next part and I hand it off to Matt, I'd just like to make an observation that Roots, for its part, seeks to to alleviate some of the initial pressure, shock of this system on a business owner, a cooperative business owner, by effectively a version of outsourcing of some of these functions that might not necessarily come naturally, easily, or prepackaged for many people, but are also essential to the executive function of a business. And the support that's offered is of course more than on this chart. It's energetic. It's the support that you get from other cooperative owners through events like this. But it's important to, I think, tie it back to what we were talking about earlier. Not to go back to it by any means, but just to tie it back to some of the executive function is oft is made less by organizations like groups.
And can I just point out that nonprofits aren't the only ones who do that. Ethics is doing that for Works right now. Ethics is a for-profit company that does the merchandising. They have all that Ethics merch, and they're incubating Works Printing Co-op, and they're doing all the sales work and marketing, right? So eventually Works will build up its own sales and marketing arm, but right now they're just doing production and that side of it. So it can be other forms. There's also alliances of co-ops that do this for other co-ops that aren't necessarily nonprofits. The Valley Alliance for Worker Cooperatives, before it became a nonprofit, just did it as an association of cooperatives, for example.
Was it formally?
And the Federation of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, before it had a nonprofit arm, was also doing this.
Was the Valley Alliance for Worker Cooperatives a formal entity, or was it just an alliance that was sort of, comprised of the members of other co-ops?
I don't know. Janelle,
So, I think we hand it off to Matt.
So we only have 8 minutes left in the whole evening, so I don't know if we have time to do the gallery walk, but we can have a conversation about these.
Okay. So we're running short on time, and we're respectful of people's time and have that healthy balance. So I'm going to read aloud what is on these boards that you may or may not get to look at up close. Do you know of any examples of good co-op nonprofit relationships, and what are they? And then over here is what potential pitfalls do you see when trying to establish a working relationship with a nonprofit? What are the potential major benefits? Go into detail.
And number 3 is what resources are available.
And number 3 are what resources are available made possible by a relationship with a nonprofit.
In general, on this topic, I think it's broad.
Okay. So these are 3 points that what we would have done is had everyone get up, take a pen, and then write a response. But perhaps we could
Do a popcorn.
do a popcorn. I'll try to focus it to one thing at a time, but if you have something for the other questions, please say so. But starting here, you know any examples of a good co-op nonprofit relationship? And what are they?
So what makes a relationship good is also what makes it problematic, is that it works and it becomes a crutch. That's my
Good. I will put that over here in the potential pitfalls. Crutch. Crutch for co-ops.
Crutch independence.
Yes.
You get time to figure out what you can and can't do with your market. So, like you guys figured out that it wasn't going to be viable, and you didn't have to put all this money in and then fail to figure it out.
You do that one all the time.
Okay.
People should just shout them out.
Yeah. Any other observations that you have about the nonprofit co-op relationship?
I think could be problematic if the relationship is the other way around. Then a nonprofit start making, like, having that relationship with the business is what is making this nonprofit sustainable. And that codependence could happen too. Like, I don't wanna let go because they're making money for us, kind of thing. Because finding, sometimes getting funds for nonprofits are hard too. And if you're good at the business side but bad at the nonprofit side, it could be the other way around.
In two ways I've seen that happen. One, you mentioned like grants, if you're financially dependent on that co-op, or if you're co-branded with that co-op. Their brand is so much part of the nonprofit brand that you don't want to let that go for fear. And I think this is something that might have happened with Roots too. Toxic Soul Busters, everyone knew about Toxic Soul Busters. Who knew about Roots? Maybe not as many people at one point in time, you know? So did Roots want to really be eager, go off on your own, Toxic Soul Busters, and then no one will know about Roots. There was the fear of that, I think, to some degree. And there's
Co-branding, codependence.
yeah. And on the funding side, I know of a co-op, a cleaning co-op in this state that was ready to branch off on their own, and the nonprofit said, no, you can't, pretty much, and stole their funding.
Anyone have any good examples to combat the horrible list there?
Well, I think that the ECWD works. Or the,
What about it?
what it works?
You know, what do you feel like it's a great benefit of it?
I think it's a great benefit to have spaces where co-ops learn from other co-ops and like is very thoughtfully and facilitated to get some of those challenges out and some of the resources out instead of each co-op going to find those resources by themselves. But everybody's there, everybody's invited, you know, it's a big party and everybody get to know each other. I mean,
You can also just seed the idea of co-op. So you have a group of people and who might know nothing about co-ops but might wanna make some money or, you know, create jobs that make sense, meaningful, etc. And so having a nonprofit that both supports that and introduces a new model, a different, introduces the principles of a cooperative, a worker cooperative, seeds the idea, gives them time to sort of work with it and assume the identity of a worker in a worker cooperative. You know, I mean, it changes how you understand yourself, how you think of yourself in relation to your other workers and in relation to what you do. So it gives you time to become somebody different.
So time to develop a culture and the skill set to run a co-op?
Yeah.
For
And an identity too.
It's like a cushion idea too.
For us, it was about not losing the business's focus on core value-added model, while at the same time fulfilling the broader goals, making sure that there is community engagement and there is general accessibility to tools that for us would otherwise be idle.
You started with an economic analysis.
Where we, there are a lot of stuff I do start, unfortunately.
I think something that has perhaps been implied but not said out loud was a mission-centeredness that nonprofits offer, and that when you go into a business and you seek to not only generate income for yourself, but for your coworkers, your fellow owners. That has, some ad bills behind it that a lot of times nonprofits will share.
Access to a community too, like diggers coming into Roots got access to new clients that knew Roots, and that kind of thing, and support. And if I would encourage each of us to have at least some relationship with the Democracy at Work Institute, which was started by the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. We don't all have the capacity to put together the numbers nationally of how many co-ops there are, make the case, do some advocacy, but we can be part of a national group that does that.
Does that kind of function like the Craig's Co-op list?
They have a directory of members.
Is it user friendly?
It's still starting. They
It
just
seems like it's
started.
limited to members too. Excellent.
Yeah.
32. And we are due to wrap up. There's one more piece we need to discuss, and it is the fundraising element to the Co-op Academy tuition. Right? For those of you who may not know, that the Co-op Academy requires a tuition, and there have been efforts from the root side to encourage people to apply for fundraising or engage in certain fundraising techniques to generate the funds to pay for this. I was just bid to bring it up and as a reminder to contribute your tuition costs. And if you need any insight, help, questions answered, etc., any of the root staff, especially Matt, Shane, and I, are more than willing to help you. Are there any other announcements?
In related to fundraising, for the equal exchange stuff, if people have their checks in like the catalog spreadsheet or whatever it is, I can start putting that in, hopefully getting products to you. In terms of people who wanted more catalogs, I haven't sent them to you yet, so I can't give them to you today. But as soon as they come in, I'll try and pick that.
So are you gonna send something? Are you gonna
Order.
You're gonna send an order out this week?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Well, I mean, if I get all the stuff that I need.
You're gonna do it again, so because there are people who are waiting on their stuff.
Right.
So
I've only got you, is the thing.
But I
So,
have over the
you don't need to
minimum.
worry, because I'm gonna send yours.
The minimum was 170, right?
Yeah, so
I
you're
see.
totally
Yeah.
fine.
Please send that one in.
Yeah. Okay. And then Matt has 2 extra catalogs if anyone's
And we have some orders to place today too, so they could go with Judy's.
Any other announcements from any arena of events, news, forecasts? Babies being born, things like that.
I have a proposal for homework. That we take that chart that Kevin gave us. Where is it?
We all use it.
This chart, and we think about it in terms of our co-op. And we think about who does these functions in our co-op, or which functions aren't quite being done. And we do a report back at the next session about that. One other thing is that next week we're talking about how to cover our assets. That's how do we get the proper licensing, and how we get the right insurance and stuff like that. So the homework I'm proposing is that we think of specific questions about insurance, because we'll have someone who's an insurance agent. Ross Dick from Night Dick Insurance will be coming next week, so bring your questions.
One announcement is CFNE is still accepting applications for the TA grant, Technical Assistance Grant, and that form has gone out. So if anybody else wants to get technical assistance from CFNE.
Then you should definitely get it in ASAP.
It's not fun.
We talked about it at the beginning.
The grant.
So I just wanna invite the folks, if somebody wants to be part of the conversation about the creating a website or whatever, maybe we can have or in your sign-in sheet, you still have the sign-in sheet outside, maybe right there that you're interested in a collective website or in marketing group, and put it there so we can maybe send an email and start an email chain or something.
I just wanted to this is something that I just want to check in with people about. If you go in, as we're gonna wrap up, say goodbye. Check out and say like how you felt about today's academy with a number. No words, just a number on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think that'll be it. Very little comments though, just more numbers. 1 being pooptastic, and 10 being I changed my life today by coming here.
7.
That's pretty good.
Jackpot.
You're not saying anything.
That was the number I heard.
Isn't that
Yeah.
Passive.
7.5.
8. What up?
8 for me too.
6.
So that's 7 out of 7. Hey. 2.
What's there, 7? 7.
I'll do an 8.
I'll also say an 8.
8.
Muy bien.
I guess 7.5. Got it.
8.
Probably like a 5. I'm sick.
Sorry.
I'm checking out a 9. I feel like this dude Kevin, man. I don't know. I really don't know I feel like this dude knew what he was talking about.
You just
And this is
like the
changed my
thread.
life. This is borderline. It changed my life a lot. Anyway, so thank you all for coming. Remember, co-ops can end poverty. Co-ops can end poverty and mine too.